The email landed in my inbox mid-presentation. Subject: project, deadline personal. I was Mike Anderson, 43, senior project manager, deep in a critical path review with the stakeholders for our new downtown high-rise. 15 years of marriage, summarized in 5 brutal lines. Linda wanted a divorce. She'd already consulted a lawyer. Moved her stuff out. With him. I clicked through the next slide. Smiled. Answered a question about upcoming RES milestones. No one in the conference room noticed a thing. 20 minutes later, the presentation wrapped. A success. Back at my desk, the tremor in my hands was the only giveaway as I reread her concise termination notice. I replied with 2 words: acknowledged. Will review. No drama. No begging. Just treating it like another unexpected project scope change, albeit one that would demolish my personal life. I had to know how we got here. The investigation phase had just begun. The truth is, the him wasn't a total shock. The change requests in our life project had been piling up for months, subtle at first. Linda, my wife, started having late nights, supposedly for her advanced dental hygienist certification study group, 3 times a week. Then came the new wellness obsession, complete with new friends I never met and hushed phone calls that ended abruptly when I walked in. Her phone, once casually left on the kitchen counter, became her constant, guarded companion. I didn't snoop, that's not my style. But I'm a project manager. Risk mitigation is second nature. 6 months ago, I'd quietly digitized all our key financial documents, property deeds, and investment statements, storing them on an encrypted personal drive, separate from our shared cloud. I also opened a new bank account under my name only, diverting a small, unnoticeable percentage of my quarterly bonuses there. As contingency plan. My gut, honed by years of sniffing out potential project delays and budget overruns, told me this particular joint venture was heading for a catastrophic failure. I met Linda Miller at a colleague's 4th of July barbecue back in 2008. I was a junior project coordinator then, still learning the ropes of managing timelines and resources. She was vibrant, just out of hygiene school, full of laughter and plans for the future. We clicked instantly, talked for hours amidst the smell of burgers and the pop of distant fireworks. We were married within a year. She used to say she admired my drive, my ability to make things happen. Our first apartment, a tiny 1-bedroom, felt palatial after we spent a weekend wrestling with IKEA furniture, a joint project fueled by cheap pizza and high hopes. Those were good days. Simple, clear objectives, shared goals. My folks were working class. Dad was a union carpenter. Mom a school secretary. Hard work and accountability were drilled into me. Linda's family was different. Her father, a successful orthodontist, and her mother, a socialite, had a more laissez-faire approach to life's commitments, or so it seemed to me. We bought our house in Evanston, a suburb of Chicago, after my first big project success as a lead. A modest 3-bedroom colonial. It was our biggest joint investment. I managed the mortgage and the renovation budget like any other project. She picked the paint colors and the god-awful paisley curtains for the living room. We made it work, or so I thought. My career demanded long hours, constant problem-solving, navigating complex stakeholder demands. Sometimes I'd bring the stress home, venting about scope creep on a difficult construction project or a vendor failing to deliver on time. She'd listen, or at least she used to. The distance didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual erosion. My boring, all-consuming job became a frequent complaint. You're always at the site, Mike, or glued to your laptop. Then came her spiritual awakening phase, heavily influenced by a new, very chic yoga studio and its charismatic owner, a guy named David. Our conversations dwindled from shared dreams to mere logistics: who was picking up groceries, when the plumber was coming. The final, unacknowledged deliverable on our failing marriage contract was our 15th anniversary. She claimed she totally forgot because she was at an essential wellness retreat that weekend. A week later, a well-meaning acquaintance, oblivious, showed me photos from her social media feed from that exact weekend. Linda, glowing, at a beach resort in Tulum. David's arm draped casually around her. That was the real project completion report. I knew then. I just hadn't received the official termination memo until today. Acknowledged. Will review. Email was sent. Then the real work started. 2 days after Linda's email, while cross-referencing our joint investment portfolio against my personal records, a routine risk assessment I'd started doing quarterly, I noticed discrepancies. Small at first, a few $100s moved from a joint brokerage account to an unfamiliar account number. Then a larger one, 5,000 Zosen. I dug into the transaction history. The recipient account was simply titled LD Future Fund, Linda and David. It felt a little too on the nose. I pulled up the statements for our shared high-yield savings, the one we'd earmarked for a kitchen renovation. It was being systematically drained. Over the last 2 months, a series of transfers, always just under the 10,000 mark that might trigger a bank inquiry. The total, over 37,000, gone. I checked the dates. The withdrawals accelerated right around the time her Advanced Dental Hygienist Certification Study Group supposedly intensified. And another thing, a new credit card I didn't recognize, issued on our joint line of credit, with a naughty 15,000 balance. Purchases were mostly from high-end boutiques, expensive restaurants, and a recurring charge for a wellness retreat booking service. This wasn't just her leaving, this was a planned extraction. My office suddenly felt cold, despite the late spring sun outside. I saved copies of everything to my encrypted drive. Every transaction, every statement. Evidence. The next morning, during a brief coffee break between stakeholder meetings, I caught Sarah Chen, a fellow senior PM, and one of the sharpest people I knew. We'd been through a few corporate battles together. Got a minute, Sarah? Personal project. Need a second opinion on the scope. We stepped into an empty huddle room. I laid out the basics, clinically. The email, the financial discrepancies, the new credit card. No emotion, just facts. Sarah listened, her expression unreadable at first. Then she nodded slowly. Mike, this isn't just a messy divorce. This looks like calculated asset stripping. You said she mentioned a him? Yeah, a yoga instructor, David Carter. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Okay, first, change every password you have, personal and financial. Secure your own accounts immediately. Second, you need to document everything: dates, times, amounts. Create a detailed timeline. You're good at that. Treat this like a hostile project takeover, because that's what it is. And get a lawyer. Not just any divorce lawyer, someone who understands financial forensics. Her pragmatism was exactly what I needed. No pity, just actionable advice. Thanks, Sarah. That's helpful. Anytime, Mike. Keep your head clear. Focus on the deliverables. That night, I decided to check something I hadn't looked at in months: our shared cloud storage. Linda wasn't tech savvy. She probably forgot it existed or assumed I never used it. I logged in. Buried in a misnamed folder called Vacation Pics. Old were recent additions. Not photos, scanned documents, PDFs. One was a personal loan agreement between Linda Miller and David Carter for 20,000, dated 3 months ago, citing business startup capital as the purpose. My blood ran cold. Our money funding his business. Then I found emails. She'd apparently used the cloud as a backup. Emails between her and David. My stomach churned. Explicit, detailed, Not just about their affair, but about their future. His future. Once we secure the initial funding stream, one of David's emails read, "We can expand the wellness center concept." Another from Linda. Has so focused on his projects, he barely notices anything else. The final milestone for us is separating our finances cleanly. There were also screenshots of our joint account balances sent from her to him, and photos Linda and David beaming in what looked like a newly leased studio space, much larger and more upscale than his previous hole, in the wall yoga spot. The metadata on the photos confirmed the date 2 weeks ago. They were using my money, our money, to build their dream. I methodically downloaded everything. Each file saved, cataloged. The emotional shock was there, a dull ache. But the project manager in me was taking over. The data points were forming a very clear, very ugly picture. The initial shock, the gut punch of the email had faded, replaced by something colder, clarity. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore, not primarily. This was about a breach of contract, a fraudulent claim on shared assets, a hostile seizure. My training kicked in. I started a new project file on my secure drive, Project Nightingale Recovery. My first task, resource allocation. Legal counsel was primary. I spent hours researching lawyers specializing in complex divorces with elements of financial fraud. The next morning, I called my employee assistance program. They gave me a few referrals. One name stood out, Jessica Riley, described as tenacious and with a strong track record in asset recovery. I drafted an email to her, subject line, urgent consultation, marital asset dissolution and potential financial misappropriation. I attached no documents, just a brief, factual outline of the situation and my immediate availability. This was no longer just a personal crisis, it was a recovery operation. My objective: retrieve what was mine and ensure accountability. An hour later, Jessica Riley's office replied. An associate scheduled a video call for that afternoon. Ms. Riley can speak with you at 3 p.m. Please be prepared to discuss the timeline and any preliminary evidence you've gathered. Prompt. Professional. I liked that. At 3 p.m. sharp, I clicked the meeting link. Jessica Riley appeared on screen. Early 50s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. No wasted pleasantries. Mr. Anderson. Thank you for reaching out. I've read your summary. Let's start with when you first suspected financial irregularities. I walked her through it. The email from Linda, the bank statements, the credit card, the cloud documents. I kept my tone even, factual, like presenting a project status report. She listened intently, occasionally interjecting with a precise question. The loan agreement between Ms. Miller and Mr. Carter, was your signature on it anywhere? No. It was presented as a personal loan between them. And the source of the 20,000 transferred from our joint savings account, which I can demonstrate. She nodded. Okay, Mike, may I call you Mike? We need to move quickly. Freeze any joint accounts you still have access to, if legally permissible in your state for now. We'll verify that. We also need to issue a formal notice of claim. This David Carter, what more do you know about him? The way she said it, Mike, wasn't overly familiar, but it established a working rapport. I felt a sliver of control returning. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was engaging. Jessica and her team got to work immediately. We'll do some due diligence on Mr. Carter and this wellness center, she'd said. 2 days later, she called me. Mike, we have something. We ran a background check on David Carter. It's illuminating. And we also pulled property and business records. She shared her screen. There it was. David Carter had a pattern. 2 previous business partners, both women, both recently divorced or separated. Both had invested significant sums in his ventures, only for the businesses to conveniently dissolve and Carter to move on. But here's the kicker. Jessica continued, her cursor hovering over a document. Linda Co. signed the lease for his new, upscale yoga studio. Not as an investor, but as a guarantor, using your joint financial statements to prove fiscal stability. And it seems Mr. Carter submitted a business loan application to a private lender, listing projected income based on guaranteed future investment tranches from Linda. That application also included a heavily inflated valuation of his existing, nearly defunct, yoga business. I stared at the documents. Forged. No, Linda had signed, but based on our assets. She used our financial history to secure his lease and attempted loan. Precisely. And the LD Future Fund you mentioned. It's a sole proprietorship account in David Carter's name. Linda was just depositing directly into his pocket. The systematic nature of it was staggering. This wasn't a sudden fling. This was a long con. My project management brain logged its scope creep of the highest order, bleeding into every aspect of my financial life. It gets deeper, Mike, Jessica said, her voice grim. Wacross referenced Carter's previous partners. One of them, a Dr. Elaine Hayes, also a dental professional like Linda, had reported Carter for fraud 2 years ago. But the case stalled, lack of direct evidence linking him to her losses after the business failed. But the memo is identical, charismatic figure, promises of a lucrative spiritual or wellness venture, siphoning of funds. We also found something concerning in the fine print of Linda's new employment contract with that upscale dental clinic she joined 6 months ago. The one she said offered amazing growth opportunities. Her position there seems to be tied to patient referrals from Carter's network. It's possible Carter isn't just a con artist. He might be running a more elaborate scheme, using people like Linda not just for their money, but for their professional connections. I felt a chill. Linda, my wife, potentially entangled in something far more sinister than just an affair and financial betrayal. Was she a willing participant or a deeply manipulated pawn? The lines were blurring. What does this mean for us? I asked. This, referring to our legal strategy. It means, Jessica said, that this isn't just a divorce, it's potentially a conspiracy to defraud. This significantly changes our change management approach from simple asset division to aggressive recovery and possible criminal complaints. The following Monday, Jessica's firm initiated formal actions. Cease and desist letters were dispatched to Linda and David Carter, demanding an immediate halt to any further use or transfer of marital assets and the return of misappropriated funds. Notifications of disputed transactions and potential fraud were sent to all relevant financial institutions, including the bank holding the LD Future Fund and the credit card company. We also filed a motion with the court for an emergency order to freeze all known assets controlled by Linda and David that were derived from our marital property. Jessica walked me through each step. This is about establishing a clear legal perimeter, Mike. We're cordoning off the damage. It felt like finally implementing a critical phase of a recovery project, moving from assessment to active intervention. The legal documents, filled with jargon and clauses, were the new project as deliverables. A few days later, my phone buzzed. A text from Linda. Mike, what the hell is going on? The bank just froze my account, and David's studio account is also locked. Lawyers are calling him. What did you do? Her panic was palpable through the screen. The project manager in me noted. Risk item realized. Counterparty alerted. The feds weren't just knocking. Jessica Riley had practically kicked the door down for them. Agent Miller, no relation. Thankfully, and Agent Davies from the FBI's Economic Crimes Unit met with Jessica and me a week after Linda's panicked text. They'd already reviewed the Project Nightingale recovery file I'd meticulously compiled. "Mr. Anderson," Agent Miller began, her gaze direct, "your lawyer has provided us with substantial preliminary evidence. The patterns of financial movement, the co-signed lease under potentially false pretenses, Mr. Carter's history. It paints a clear picture of a potential conspiracy to defraud, with your marital assets as the primary target." Jessica nodded. "We believe Carter is the architect, using Ms. Miller as a key instrument, possibly leveraging her professional credentials for wider schemes." They explained that David Carter was now a person of significant interest, not just for what he did to me, but for a string of similar incidents across state lines. My case, with its clear documentation trail, could be the linchpin. Our next step, Jessica advised, was proactive, but legal. "Linda texted you wanting to meet, right?" "Don't. But they're clearly rattled by the frozen accounts. They'll be desperate to liquidate remaining assets, especially the house. We formulated a plan. I still had remote access to the smart home security system I'd installed, the one Linda probably forgot about. We'll monitor the house. Carter will likely pressure Linda to expedite a sale, maybe even try something underhanded to get quick cash," I told Jessica. She agreed. "If they discuss the fraudulent activities, or try to access or remove property illegally while we have a clear audio-visual record, that's gold." For 3 days, I kept an eye on the camera feeds intermittently from my temporary rental, a small, sterile apartment that felt miles away from my old life. Then, on the 4th morning, Linda's car pulled into the driveway. A few minutes later, David Carter's flashy SUV followed. Showtime. I immediately started a continuous screen recording and called Jessica, who then looped in Agent Miller. On my monitor, Linda and David were in the living room, agitated. The audio was clear. The lawyer said Mike's claiming everything was fraud. Linda's voice was shrill. David paced. "I can't prove anything if we sell this place fast. Take the cash. And I transfer it through the Cayman account I set up for the wellness franchise. He'll just think we sold low to spite him." He then mentioned a private buyer he had lined up, someone who doesn't ask too many questions, and would pay cash or below market for a quick close. "We need to get any valuables out now, Linda, before his lawyer slaps a line on the contents too." They started opening drawers, looking for my old watch collection and some family silver. I narrated key points to Agent Miller on the phone. They're admitting to intent to hide assets, discussing illicit financial transfers, and are about to remove items not belonging to Ms. Miller, I stated, my voice steady despite the thumping in my chest. 20 minutes later, 2 unmarked cars and a local police cruiser pulled up. Uniformed officers and plainclothes agents, Miller among them, approached the house. No sirens, just a firm knock. I watched on my screen as David opened the door, his smug look dissolving into shock. Linda crumpled onto the sofa. No escape, no excuses, no way out. They were escorted out in handcuffs. The investigation moved like a well-oiled machine after that. The feds, armed with our recordings and Jessica's earlier due diligence, unraveled David Carter's entire operation. It wasn't just about seducing vulnerable women and draining their bank accounts. He was also using their professional standing, Linda as a dental hygienist, another victim who was a pharmacist, to try and legitimize shady wellness, product distribution and investment schemes. My 37,000, the attempted fraudulent house sale, these were just pieces of a much larger, multi-state con game. Agent Miller later told me they identified at least 5 other women Carter had systematically defrauded, using nearly identical playbooks. What Linda thought was a path to an exciting new life was, for Carter, just another project phase in his grifting career. David Carter, facing overwhelming evidence, pleaded guilty to multiple counts of wire fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. He got 7 years in federal prison. Linda, portrayed by her lawyer as a manipulated pawn, cooperated fully. She pleaded to a lesser charge, received probation, community service, and was ordered to pay full restitution of her share of the misappropriated funds. Her dental license was suspended pending review. Our divorce was finalized quickly thereafter. Irreconcilable differences. Felt like the understatement of the century, but it was clean. Jessica had ensured the settlement reflected the fraud, with Linda forfeiting any claim to the house or my retirement funds. The project closure report on my marriage was finally signed off. Standing in the empty Evanston house after the cleaners left, preparing it for sale, felt surreal. Every room echoed with Linda's betrayal and David's parasitic influence. My meticulously managed life project, the one I'd built with Linda, was now a toxic asset. I couldn't stay. Not in this house, not in this city, not even in this career that, while successful, had made me a target by its very nature of providing substantial assets to plunder. I called Sarah Chen. "I'm selling the house, Sarah, and I'm resigning. Taking a sabbatical may be permanent." She wasn't surprised. "Good for you, Mike. Sometimes a change order of this magnitude is the only way to get the project back on a viable path, your life project. I mean." My resignation was accepted with understanding I'd always delivered. I sold the house, taking a small loss just to be rid of it quickly, packed my car with essentials, left the rest. I drove west, no specific destination, just a need for mountains and space. I ended up in Bozeman, Montana. Found a small, rundown cabin on a few acres with a creek. It needed work. A lot of work. It was perfect. I bought it with cash from the house sale. My PM skills found a new outlet. Project managing my own life from the ground up. I started doing carpentry and custom woodworking, skills I'd picked up from my dad. Small jobs at first, bookshelves, a deck for a neighbor. The work was tangible, honest. I'd spend my days measuring, cutting, sanding, blueprinting, and building something real with my own hands. No more Gantt charts, no more stakeholder meetings. My pension covered the basics. The woodworking paid for the extras and kept me busy. I got a rescue dog, a scruffy mutt I named Max. Our days fell into a rhythm: early mornings, strong coffee, physical labor, quiet evenings by the fire. About a year later, a letter arrived, forwarded from Jessica's office. It was from a woman in Oregon. Her husband, a Navy SEAL, had been deployed when David Carter, using a slightly varied MO, had tried to entangle her in a bogus real estate investment. "Agent Miller mentioned your case was instrumental in building the federal one against him," she wrote. "They were able to freeze his accounts before I lost everything. Your willingness to fight back, to meticulously document everything, saved our savings, maybe even our home. Thank you." I read it 3 times, pinned it to the rough-hewn kitchen wall. My actions, born out of personal crisis, had rippled outwards, protected others. It wasn't just about recovering my money. It was about stopping a predator. Jessica occasionally updated me. Linda was reportedly working as a dental assistant in a small town, trying to rebuild. Carter was, last I heard, trying to run a prison yard yoga scam, which didn't get very far. Sometimes, sitting on my porch with Max, watching the Montana sunset paint the Gallatin Range, I'd think about it all. The anger was long gone. So was the pain, mostly. Just a quiet understanding. Life isn't a project you can control with perfect planning. Sometimes, the most critical lessons learned come from catastrophic failures. And sometimes, tearing it all down is the only way to build something stronger, something truly your own.